I know there are some things in life people never forget, not because they're beautiful, but because they hurt. And every time you breathe, that pain comes alive again. My name is Janet. I'm 67 years old, living in Portland, Oregon, and this story began on the day my daughter got married without me. That Tuesday morning, I was still wearing my apron. My hands smelled of onions, preparing a simple stir-fry to save electricity. My phone buzzed once, then went silent. I picked it up, thinking it was the electric company, but no, it was my daughter, Emily. Her voice played in a recorded message. "Hey, Mom. Just wanted to say everything's set for the wedding, but the seating's only for close family here in town, okay? We'll stream it live. I'll send you the link. Just click to watch. Love you." Her tone was cheerful, bright, but every word felt like a dull knife cutting into my heart. I froze in my tiny kitchen, hearing the pan burn behind me, but unable to move. The whole world seemed to stop, leaving only pain in motion. I sat on the old sofa, staring at the ceiling for nearly 10 minutes, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I already understood. No more words were needed. I wasn't invited. I wasn't meant to go. I was only meant to watch the live stream. Of all the ways to tell a mother she's no longer a priority, this was the most modern and the cruelest. I sat there, my mouth dry, my heart slamming shut like a drawer. I remembered a few months earlier when I withdrew money from my late husband Richard's last savings after almost 40 years together to help Emily pay part of her wedding costs. It wasn't much, but it came from love. She didn't ask. I offered, because I saw that spark in her eyes, the spark I hadn't seen in years. I just wanted to be part of her joy. I wanted her to know that even though I don't have much left, I'm still her mother. I remembered the day we went to choose flowers together. She loved white lilies, but hesitated because they were expensive. I told her, "It's okay. I'll figure it out." She smiled, held my hand, and I kept that moment like a treasure. Back then, I thought love was enough. But when love is pushed aside, what are you supposed to do? When you become the last to know, the last to be remembered, the last to be named. That morning, after the message ended, I didn't cry, scream, or reply. I opened the window and let the wind rush in. I needed to breathe something other than the poison sweetness I'd just swallowed. I brewed coffee and poured it into the blue mug Emily had given me for Mother's Day in 2015. The rim now chipped. I sat down, drinking slowly, my throat tightening. My eyes landed on the photo shelf, her in her white graduation gown, my hand on her shoulder, and Richard beside us, smiling softly. She was still my daughter. It's just, I was no longer her priority. That morning, I finally understood. To her, I was useful, the one who signed papers, who listened when no one else did, who she called when life felt heavy, but not the one invited to celebrate, just a spectator behind the screen. I tried to be rational. Maybe it was about costs or guest limits. But the human heart isn't a spreadsheet it feels before it understands. I set the phone on top of the fridge, didn't answer, didn't read another thing. For the first time in years, the house seemed to have its own voice, hollow, like me. If Richard were alive, he would have called her immediately, saying firmly, "Your mother isn't an option. She's the foundation." But Richard's been gone 5 years. Since then, I've learned to swallow silence. That afternoon, my neighbor Martha asked if I was excited for Emily's wedding. She said she'd seen it on Facebook. It looked grand, full of lights, drones, and movie-style decorations. I smiled and said, "I'm sure it'll be beautiful." I didn't tell her I'd only watch it through a screen, or maybe not at all. That night, I went to bed early, but couldn't close my eyes. Her recorded voice echoed in my mind. hammering against the walls. For the closest family only. Closest to whom? I gave her life. I changed every diaper, attended every parent-teacher meeting alone, saved every dollar to pay for her speech therapy when she struggled to talk as a child. I taught her how to cross the street, how to do laundry, how to endure her first menstrual cramps. And yet, on her wedding day, I was just someone watching online. That night, I didn't cry, and I didn't sleep. For the first time in my life, I asked myself, had I spent my whole life devoted to someone who saw me as nothing more than a footnote in her own story? The next morning, I decided not to respond to the voicemail. Not yet. Because really, what could I say when I no longer had a place at the table? Sometimes, the quietest silence isn't ours. It's from those who've stopped seeing us as existing. Sitting on the couch, holding the chipped mug in my hands, I understood. I wasn't forgotten. I was deliberately ignored. Then the wedding day arrived Saturday. I woke before sunrise, out of habit from the days when Richard still needed me early. The human body remembers what's gone, like an old scar itching in the cold. The house was silent. In the fridge, just a few slices of bread, some butter, and half a pot of cold coffee. But I wasn't hungry. I opened the closet and took out the navy blue dress, the one I had prepared back when I still thought I'd be attending the ceremony. It wasn't new, but it was clean and neatly pressed. I put on the small gold necklace, the one Richard had given me on our last anniversary together. I remembered his words. You're still the most beautiful woman at the party, even if the party's just in our living room. I dressed slowly, like it was a ritual, tied my hair low, dabbed on soft lipstick, sprayed a hint of perfume, the kind I only used on special occasions. Looking in the mirror, I felt strange. Not sad, just empty. I picked up my purse and stepped outside. The sunlight was still weak, spreading pale gold across the rooftops. I walked aimlessly through a few blocks, letting the cold air slip down my back, my legs numb under thin stockings. I didn't know exactly where I was going, only that I couldn't stay. The apartment had become an echo chamber, where the words, "You can watch the live stream," bounced off the walls each time, cutting deeper. Then I passed a small diner on the corner, the kind most people overlook, but where the air smells like meals, cooked with patience and care. It was the same little restaurant Richard used to take me to on special occasions. Suddenly, I wanted to step inside, and I did. The place had just opened, warm yellow lights glowing, the glass door still half open. A waiter smiled softly, maybe thinking I was waiting for someone. "A table for two?" he asked. I shook my head gently and said, "Just one today." I sat by the window from there. I could see the quiet Portland street. I ordered something I usually never do, grilled steak with mashed potatoes and steamed vegetables. I also ordered a glass of red wine, even though I'd stopped drinking since I started taking my blood pressure medicine. But that day, I didn't want to think about pills, illness, or rules. I just wanted to exist. While waiting for my meal, I picked up a napkin and started drawing random lines with my fingernail. I didn't even know what I was sketching, maybe a flower, or maybe it was just a way to keep from thinking. Then, I suddenly remembered the first party dress I ever bought for Emily. She was 11, invited to a classmate's birthday party. We barely had money back then, even buying bread required careful counting. But I found a way. I did laundry for the neighbors, ironed clothes for others, and saved enough to buy a pale pink dress with a silk ribbon at the waist. She twirled in the middle of the room, laughing, a little princess in motion. Funny how we cling to those moments, like anchors in a sea of fading memories. The food arrived. I ate slowly, each bite tasting of salt from the sauce and the bitterness rising from my stomach. Every now and then, I looked out the window, imagining Emily's wedding happening right then. Guests laughing, flashes from cameras, the sound of soft music, and Emily walking down the aisle, maybe holding her father-in-law's arm, or maybe walking alone. I didn't know. And for the first time, I realized I didn't even want to know. Not out of anger, but because it no longer belonged to me. I finished my meal, drank the last sip of wine, and looked around. Families sharing lunch, young couples whispering, groups of friends laughing. An old man gently wiped a tear from his wife's cheek with a napkin. A girl laughed loudly into her phone. Life kept moving just without me, in any of its frames. I stood up to pay. The cashier smiled and said, "Hope to see you again soon." The dress felt tighter, or maybe it was just my chest, heavy with everything I couldn't say. When I got back, I didn't turn on the TV or touch my phone. I lay down on the bed, still fully dressed, staring at the ceiling like I was watching a silent movie. I didn't cry, and maybe that was the scariest part. The pain of silence weighs more than any scream. I closed my eyes, and before drifting off or maybe just shutting down every feeling, I thought about what it truly means to be a mother. And I realized, sometimes, being a mother means giving everything, only to be repaid with a live stream link. That night, I allowed myself to disappear, not from the world, but from the role I had carried my whole life without question. For the first time, I stopped being the foundation and started imagining what it meant to live on the edge, finally, apart from a center that never really saw me. The next morning, I woke to the phone vibrating nonstop. I stayed there, body heavy, eyes burning, as if I hadn't slept at all. Light slipped through the blinds, harsh and blinding. For a moment, I thought it was an alarm or a call from the bank. But when I looked closely, it was Emily. I swiped the screen. 53 missed calls, some from the night before, most around dawn. Dozens of messages, several voice notes, some short, some long, some filled with emojis. "Mom, are you okay? I'm so worried. Did you watch the live stream? Please say something." I stared at the screen like it was shattered glass on the floor, impossible to piece back together. Holding the phone in both hands, I pressed it to my chest. I didn't know whether to cry, turn it off, or respond. I did none of those things. I just took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and tried to understand why only now she was panicking. Or maybe she finally realized that the absence she gave me had come back to her. I sat up, my legs aching, my blood pressure low. I walked slowly to the kitchen and turned on the kettle. The house was silent except for the hum of my thoughts. I took the chipped mug from the day before, poured the old coffee, weak, cold, but enough to remind me I was still alive, even if it hurt. I sat on the porch, letting the early sunlight touch my face. It was faint, but honest, the opposite of what I felt inside. I started thinking about everything I'd ever done for Emily, not to justify myself, but as a quiet inventory in my mind, everything I had given and everything I forgot to save for myself. I remembered the times she said she couldn't pay rent, and I, even with my small pension, still managed to send her some money. I cut meals, skipped medication, sold embroidered linens for neighbors just to transfer a little cash before she even had to ask. She always said, "Thank you, Mom. You're amazing." But her voice was light, polite, like small talk between strangers in an elevator. And it wasn't just about money, it was time, listening, presence, the quiet kind of love that never gets mentioned, but is always there. When Richard was dying, Emily rarely came. She said she was too busy, that life didn't allow her a break. I understood, I always did. But that Saturday morning, I realized I had understood wrong. She knew it would hurt me. She knew I wanted to be there. And she still chose to keep me out. That wasn't an accident. It was a choice. I went back to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, unlocked my phone, and read through all of Emily's messages. Some sounded like pleas, others full of excuses as if she were trying to stitch together a fabric that had already been torn apart. Mom, I was so overwhelmed planning the wedding. In the end, the seats filled up, and I didn't realize there wasn't one left for you. Everything happened so fast, but I was thinking about you the whole time. I didn't reply, because at that moment, no words could fill the space between us. Nothing I said could express what she had deliberately chosen to ignore. I played the voice recordings. One lasted only a few seconds, just the sound of her breathing unevenly. Another was longer. Her voice trembling. Mom, I know you're sad, angry, or both. I know I should have invited you. I know. But everything happened so fast. Then my mother-in-law said the guest list was already finalized. The hall was too small. You always understand. I replayed that sentence again and again. You always understand. Maybe that was my biggest mistake. I taught my daughter that I would always understand, always yield, that my love was something guaranteed. And when love becomes guaranteed, it also becomes invisible. I got up, went to the medicine cabinet, took one blood pressure pill and one mild sedative. Not because I was weak, but because I needed to stay calm. I didn't want to explode, I just wanted to keep what little peace I had left. A while later, the phone rang. It was Emily's mother-in-law. I didn't answer. Then another call from an unknown number. I ignored that too. I looked at the 53 missed calls and thought of all the times I had called Emily, waiting until the next day for a reply. All the times I'd texted her, only to get short, cold answers. And now, when she wanted an immediate response, I wasn't ready anymore. Not out of hate, but because I needed to protect myself. I turned off notifications, didn't delete anything, just switched the phone to airplane mode and placed it in the drawer, between old socks and the black scarf from Richard's memorial. Among all those forgotten things lay what was left of our mother-daughter bond, fragments of a love that only existed when I was useful. The rest of that day passed in absolute silence. No sound, no rush. I cooked a simple meal, white rice with fried eggs. I sat alone at the table, staring at the empty chair where Richard once sat. I let myself remember him, not with pain, but with gratitude, because he would never have let me watch our daughter's wedding through a phone screen. After dinner, I went out to the balcony. The sky was clear, the stars bright, and somehow they felt closer to me than my own daughter. For the first time in years, I didn't feel empty. I felt peaceful. Maybe peace doesn't come when things are fixed, but when you stop forcing yourself into places that keep pushing you out. That night, under the starlit sky, something rose within me. I didn't owe anyone anymore. No explanations, no replies, no instant forgiveness. If Emily wanted to see me, she could look in the mirror and face what her silence created. Monday morning, when the city returned to its usual rhythm, I woke up with one thought: to open the box where I kept my old notebooks. Not out of nostalgia, but necessity. Under the bed, inside a faded cardboard box, sat a stack of old notebooks. Expense logs, grocery lists, doctor's notes, scraps of reminders I wrote to myself and forgot. But I knew exactly which one I was looking for. The blue-covered notebook, where I had written down everything about Emily's wedding. I lifted it carefully, as if it could crumble in my hands. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I turned on the lamp. Though it was daylight, my heart was still dark. I opened it. The first page read clearly, Emily's wedding costs and ideas. My chest tightened. The shaky handwriting was still there. Buffet, $2,000, I paid half. DJ, She wanted someone popular online. I contributed 600. Flowers, white lilies, her favorite. Found a cheaper vendor. Wedding dress. She wouldn't let me buy it, but I still sent 800 as a gift. Every number was a quiet act of giving. Every line, a gesture of love. Beside them were uneven hearts, arrows, and little notes like, "Remember to bring tissues on the big day." I closed the notebook and took a deep breath. There was no denying it. I was present in every detail, every dollar saved. When I opened to the cosinette end, there was a page I didn't remember writing. The handwriting was shakier, probably written late at night. Even if she forgets, I didn't do it, expecting gratitude. I did it out of love. I read it and felt a sharp ache because it was true. The pain didn't just come from being left out of the wedding, but from realizing that everything I had done had been pushed into the background. I was just a supporting role, even in something I helped build. I paused, resting the notebook on my lap, and looked around. The little house, every corner filled with memories. The wooden kitchen cabinet Richard had installed one weekend still creaked when opened. The beige sofa stained with coffee was the same spot where Emily used to nap after school. I saw every fragment of my life and understood that all of it was still here with me, except my daughter. She was truly gone. The red blanket draped over the chair, my 60th birthday gift. "It'll keep you warm when I'm not around," Emily once said. How ironic. I walked into the room where Richard's old computer had been gathering dust for years. On the desk sat a clear plastic folder. Inside was the contract for the home decor store, the one where I had signed as the legal guarantor with my daughter. Emily's name was there too, but the first signature was mine. It wasn't just a document. It was proof that even in love, I was the one carrying all the risk. I went back to the kitchen, boiled some water, and made tea. While waiting, I opened the cabinet, took out a tin of butter cookies, bit into one, and sat down at the table. I wanted to think. I began to make an emotional inventory. What have I given? Money, time, listening, sacrifice, presence. What have I received? Apologies, excuses, silence, a live stream link, and 53 missed calls. The result was a negative balance. Not negative in love, because love can't be measured, but negative in recognition. And recognition is the bare minimum. It's what keeps love standing. I stood up, took a white envelope, and wrote on the front, "Things that cannot be taken back." Inside, I placed the store contract, copies of the cash gift receipts, and a photo of Emily and her husband from their engagement day. Not out of revenge, but to bring order. I needed to see with my own eyes what my heart had known for a long time. Then I sat at the table, picked up a pen, and began to write, not for my daughter, not for anyone else, but for myself. I titled it, "What I Learned from Not Being Invited to My Daughter's Wedding." And I wrote, line by line, "Being a mother is giving, even when no one asks. Being a mother means being remembered when you're needed and forgotten when there's joy. Being a mother is often mistaken for being the foundation, the pillar, the wall that holds everything up. Being a mother, even in pain, means staying quiet. And most of all, being a mother does not mean erasing yourself to fit into someone else's silence." I finished my cup of tea. It was cold, the cookie stale, but for the first time in days, my heart felt steady. I sealed the envelope and placed it in the bottom drawer of my closet. On top, I wrote, "Not anger, just memory." I returned to the living room, turned off my phone, and set aside everything that demanded a reaction. I didn't want to respond, argue, or teach anyone a lesson anymore. I just wanted to keep living. And in that moment, I understood. My absence from my daughter's wedding was the necessary period at the end of a chapter, so I could begin a new one, just for myself. The next morning, I opened the medicine cabinet and looked at the bottle of sedatives, but didn't take one. I had slept through the night. For the first time in years, no nightmares, no sudden awakenings, as if my body had finally understood what my mind had been screaming all along. I'm no longer the support beam, and I don't have to live as if I still need to be one. I made coffee, slung my bag over my shoulder, and stepped outside. No messages, no explanations, and none needed. There was a strange calm in that decision, like someone who had just finished paying off an old debt, not bitter, just clear. I went to Wells Fargo Bank, where I'd had my account for decades. The branch manager recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Janet, how have you been?" she asked. I smiled softly. "Today, I'm here to let go of an old habit." I sat down and said firmly, "I'd like to cancel the automatic transfer of $400 a month to my daughter, Emily." She hesitated for a moment. "Of course, ma'am." "Is there a problem?" I replied. "No, quite the opposite. I'm just tired of pretending there isn't one." She stayed silent, respectfully. 2 clicks, and the transfer was gone. I left the bank and walked along the street leading back toward downtown Portland. The sidewalk was crowded, people rushed by, cars honked, mothers held their children's hands. I felt out of place, but whole. On the way, I passed the accounting office that had handled Richard's estate after he passed. I stepped inside. The receptionist was still the same woman. "Hello, I need to discuss a piece of property." A few minutes later, I was sitting with the accountant. I handed him the documents for a small plot of land on the outskirts of Oregon, the one Richard and I had planned to leave for Emily, so she'd have a place to start over if life ever got hard. I said slowly, "I want to remove her name from the deed." He looked at me over his silver-rimmed glasses. "Your name is still the primary one, so it can be reversed." "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Janet?" I answered softly, but with certainty. "I'm sure. It was once a promise from the heart, but now I need to protect what's left of that heart." He said nothing more, just lowered his head, typed for a while, and handed me 3 copies to sign. I signed, my hand steady, and my mind light. When I left, I sat on a stone bench outside a small church in Portland. I watched pigeons pecking at the ground, children running in circles, laughing in the chilly air. I took from my bag the cold chicken sandwich I'd made that morning and ate it right there between the church bells and the smell of popcorn from a nearby cart. The sofa, refrigerator, and wardrobe Emily had bought. When she moved into her new apartment since her credit was bad, she had asked me to put them under my name. "It's just temporary, Mom. I'll pay everything back. It's only a deposit." Of course, I agreed, like every other time. But I never saw a single dollar returned, and I never asked for one. Month after month, I quietly made the payments, thinking that a mother's love shouldn't be measured. That's what I believed. Until I learned that love without limits becomes exploitation. I took the bus across town to the west side, to the furniture store where I had signed the contract. I told the manager I wanted to pay off the account in full. "The remaining balance is quite large, are you sure, ma'am?" "I'm sure. And this will be the last time I pay for something that isn't mine." I paid in silence, without anger. It was the final bill of a chapter in my life. As I walked out of the store, I allowed myself a small joy, stopping by a little shop nearby to buy 2 new towels. One ocean blue, one beige. The old ones were worn thin, barely absorbing water anymore. I chose carefully. The shop clerk smiled and said, "These are good quality. They'll last a long time." I smiled back. That's all I need, things that last. By late afternoon, I arrived home. My feet ached, but my heart felt light. I folded the towels into the cabinet, brewed a cup of chamomile tea, and sat on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the rooftops gold. No notifications, no messages, no sound from Emily. Maybe she finally understood that I wouldn't respond. Or maybe she just stopped trying. What mattered was I had stopped being the version of myself she wanted me to be. I took a new notebook, opened it, and wrote the title, Things I Don't Need to Do Anymore. Then I wrote each line slowly. Say, it's okay, when it isn't. Give what I don't have. Stay silent just to keep the peace. Justify my own existence. Invite myself where I'm not wanted. I closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and turned on the radio. An old jazz tune began to play, the kind Richard used to put on every Sunday morning. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I felt him there not as a memory, but as a quiet strength. And I realized I had cut away the invisible strings, yet kept what still held me up: dignity, deliberate silence, and the peace of someone who knows her own worth. That night, before bed, I looked in the mirror and whispered softly to myself, You deserve love too, and the first person who must care for you is you. I turned off the light, slept peacefully, no heaviness, no fear, no regret for anything that was never returned. 2 days passed. The silence on the other side of the screen surprised me for the first time. Emily didn't try to reach out. No messages, no calls. Maybe she was tired, maybe it was strategy, or maybe she had finally realized. But what I didn't expect was what happened next. Wednesday morning, while I was hanging laundry on the balcony, the doorbell rang. I rarely had visitors. Looking through the peephole, I saw the mail carrier holding a brown envelope. I signed for it, and he smiled. Delivered yesterday, but the building was closed. I brought the envelope inside, set it on the find table, and went back to finish hanging the clothes. A few minutes later, I gathered my courage and opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. In handwriting, I recognized immediately. Mom, I don't know where to start, so I'll just say it plainly. I took a deep breath and kept reading. I know you're hurting. I know what I did is unforgivable. But I still want to ask you, at least, to hear me out. The wedding that day was chaos. I got caught up in the pressure, in everyone's opinions, my mother-in-law's, the planners, and I forgot the one thing I should never have forgotten: you. She kept explaining, justifying, trying to put things into context. She said it was all a misunderstanding, that she didn't realize how much it would hurt me, as if my pain were an overreaction. Then I reached one line that said, You've always been my safe place. I thought you'd understand, like you always do. That sentence again. I folded the letter, not out of anger, but because I understood she still didn't understand. Forgiveness doesn't mean blindness. And I had seen clearly, for both of us. I walked into the kitchen and placed the letter inside the empty butter cookie tin. I didn't want to throw it away, but I didn't want it in plain sight either. The letter held no apology, only a plea to accept a pain without a name. That afternoon, the phone rang. A familiar number, the flower shop down the street. Mrs. Janet, there's a bouquet here for you. When I went downstairs, I saw it was a bouquet of white lilies, the same kind Emily had chosen for her wedding, the ones I had helped pay for. The small card attached read, To the one who should have been the first to walk in. It was the first time since that Saturday that I cried. Not out of anger, but tears long held back for all the times I had been forgotten in the story of my own daughter's life. Upstairs and placed it in a tall glass vase, since none of mine were big enough. Set it in the center of the table and sat looking at it for a long time. For the first time, Emily truly saw me not as the mother who's always there, but as the emptiness she herself had created. Maybe it's only when people lose something that they recognize the value of presence. That night, I received a short message, no sound, no emojis. Mom, you can call me whenever you want, or never. But I need to say I'm truly sorry. I didn't reply, because I still didn't know whether I wanted to or not. I put on my coat and took a walk around the neighborhood. Greeted the friendly shopkeeper at the corner store, sat for a few minutes on a park bench, then walked back home. My heart felt light but steady. The next day, when I opened my computer, a new email appeared. Subject line: Sorry for not inviting you. Sender: Emily Parker. I opened it. The letter was long, written with more restraint than the handwritten one. Mom, I've been thinking a lot. Maybe I did to you exactly what others once did to me, pushed you aside, said, it's only temporary, and never changed. I repeated that pattern with you, and it hurts. Because you didn't deserve that. This time, I read it to the end. She wrote about her childhood, remembering the nights I sat by her bed, my hand on her forehead, even after a full day of caring for Richard while he was sick. She said she now understood all that I had sacrificed so she could have a peaceful life. She apologized not only for the wedding, but for the emotional distance of so many years, something she had never been brave enough to admit. The letter ended with, if you choose to stay silent, I understand. But if one day you want to start over, I'll be here this time, with a place just for you. I closed the email and took a deep breath. No tears, no smile. I stood up, opened the closet, took out a new tablecloth, the one I'd bought at the supermarket last week, and replaced the old one. The vase of lilies was still there, but the room felt different. In that small change, I realized what I had truly gained. It wasn't my daughter's apology that defined me, but the fact that I had learned not to disappear just to fit into someone else's life. Yes, she had felt it. Yes, she had responded. But I was no longer the same. And now, her reactions no longer had the power to shape who I was. That night, I slept with my phone on normal mode. No ring startled me, no notification pulled me away from myself. Before turning off the light, I thought, maybe forgiveness isn't the answer, but a choice. And my choice now is to put myself first, even in silence. After several quiet days, I opened the bottom drawer, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the things people call memories, but to me, they felt more like anchors too old to throw away and too heavy to display. There was a broken bracelet, a Mother's Day card written in crayon, a scrap of paper with a pudding recipe, an old grocery list, a few pressed flowers between notebook pages, and at the very bottom, a small box wrapped in a beige cloth. I knew what was inside. It was the oldest family photo frame, once sitting on the shelf when Richard was still alive. The picture had been taken on a sunny Sunday at Washington Park. Emily perched on her father's shoulders, both smiling brightly. I stood beside them, my arm around Richard, all three of us sun-kissed after a long walk. The frame was simple, yet sturdy, like we were back then. For years, that photo symbolized our little family, a circle, a trio. But that morning, when I looked at it, I realized the people in that image were no longer me, no longer her. Holding the frame in both hands, I sat on the bed and stared for a long time. It was no longer just a photograph. It was a question I no longer knew how to answer. Is it worth carrying a memory when it only exists on paper? I thought of the other versions of Emily that photo could never show. The girl who stopped inviting me to Sunday dinners. The woman who only took and never gave back. The bride who shut her mother out of her own wedding. That photo, a capsule of the past. A love sealed behind glass no longer lived beyond its frame. So, without hesitation, I opened the back, pulled the picture out, and tore it. Not in anger, but with the calm of someone closing a season of her life. The pieces fell on the blanket, 4 uneven, crooked fragments. I didn't cry, and that surprised me. This wasn't a break. It was a beginning. I stood, took a paper bag, and placed the torn photo inside. Then I added a strip of blue ribbon, a piece I had kept from Emily's wedding dress, the one she'd excitedly shown me for months, and then never mentioned again. They were all symbols, remnants of a bond that was no longer a tie, only a decoration. When the shelf where the frame once sat stood empty, I felt a kind of loss. But it was loss for myself, for Janet, who had held on so tightly to a rope that her hands had bled. All that morning, I cleaned my little house in Portland. I moved the furniture, shifted the rug, took down the old yellow curtains, and replaced them with plain white ones I'd forgotten in the closet. I wiped the windows, spread a new tablecloth, and turned on the radio. It felt as if I were speaking to myself. Now you can live here, truly live. You don't need anyone else to validate your worth. By afternoon, I sat on the porch, hair tied up, barefoot. There was a strange lightness, as if the house had become a home again, just mine. I took a new notebook, the same kind I'd bought with those towels last week, and began to write a letter. Not to Emily, not to Richard, but to myself. Janet, you've endured enough. You've bent, hidden, given, until you forgot what you loved. Today, you rearrange the living room tomorrow. Rearrange your soul. You're still breathing, that means you still can. I closed the notebook, went to the kitchen, made a cup of coffee, cut a slice of leftover cake from the day before, and sat at the table. The vase of white lilies was still there, the petals beginning to wilt, yet still beautiful. Because sometimes, beauty lives right in the moment of fading. I turned on my phone for the first time in days. A new message from Emily. I didn't open it, just glanced at the preview. Mom, I just want you to know that I love you. I'm trying to understand everything. Can we please talk? I tapped the screen and saved them all into the archive folder. I didn't delete them, but I didn't read them either. It was like keeping a window closed, but letting enough light slip through the curtain in case one day I wanted to open it again. Before bed, I folded my blanket and pillow more neatly than usual, chose the pale floral pajamas I hadn't worn in ages, rubbed lotion onto my feet and lit a stick of lavender incense. Small things, but all for me. Lying down, listening to the faint sound of the radio from the living room, the last image of the night appeared in my mind. The photograph was torn, but the woman in it remained whole. And that woman was me. Still here, still alive, and stronger than ever. I woke when the Oregon sunlight hit my face. Didn't open my eyes right away. Just lay still, feeling the warmth seep through the thin curtains and touch the pillow. The room was quiet, but for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. I stretched, heard my joints crack softly, yet even that pain felt gentler than usual. I brewed fresh coffee, toasted a slice of bread with butter, sat down at the table, and looked at the vase of lilies. A few stems had drooped. I still couldn't bring myself to throw them away. After breakfast, I picked up my phone. Fewer notifications now, just 4 new messages from Emily, no calls. Her tone seemed different somehow. Maybe she finally realized that reconciliation doesn't come from overpowering someone. I opened one message, not out of weakness, but because I chose to. Mom, I know I can't undo what happened. I just want to know how you're doing. Short. Plain, I replied. No. Then I closed the app and switched the phone to silent mode. Not out of revenge, but out of maturity. I had learned, you don't have to rush to respond to what was sent without thought. That morning, I took my bag and walked several blocks through Portland, aimlessly just to feel the cold wind on my face and the rhythm of the city waking up. I stopped at a small stationery store, the kind that's cramped but warm, and bought a new notebook, light purple with neatly lined pages. I decided to make it my journal, a real one. To write, not to remember, but to keep living within myself. I got home near noon and cooked a simple meal: rice, sautéed zucchini, and a small piece of grilled meat. I ate alone, as always, but this time it had flavor. No bitterness in my mouth, only the taste of rice, of ordinary life, of being present. While washing dishes, I remembered what my mother used to say back when she lived in Kansas. People dry their plates to feel like they still have control over something. Now, I understood. That afternoon, I sat on the porch with my new notebook. I wrote the date at the top of the page, then began the first line. Not because the wound is gone, but because it has healed. My daughter's absence no longer defines me. If one day she returns with honesty, I'll be here. But I've come back to myself, and that's enough. I closed the notebook and placed it gently on the table, went inside, and replaced the vase of white lilies. I trimmed the wilted stems, kept a few still fresh, placed them in a small glass bottle, and set it on the shelf. I stood there, looking the flowers that had survived time. Not all of them, but the ones that remained were still beautiful. A beauty so symbolic, it couldn't be ignored. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Helen, Emily's mother-in-law. Dear Janet, I just wanted to say we're worried about you. I know Emily didn't act right. I hope time will calm everything down. She's been crying a lot. I didn't reply, because this time I was no longer responsible for my daughter's tears. I had cried alone enough in an empty room, in the bathroom with a towel pressed to my mouth, in the kitchen while stirring rice. And did anyone ever send a message saying I was right? Not a single person. The problem with mothers like me is this: we make others so used to our strength that when we finally collapse, they call it selfishness. But I no longer feel the need to explain that to anyone. For those who never understood, it's too late now. I made a cup of chamomile tea, sat on the bed with a short story collection I'd borrowed from a neighbor. After 2 pages, my eyes began to close, not from exhaustion, but from peace. Before turning off the light, I saw another message from Emily. The preview read, I know I have no right, but can I come by? I didn't reply. Not then. If my daughter came, I wanted her to come like real flowers, unpretentious, with no artificial scent, and most of all, sincere. She could come, but I wouldn't rush to open the door. I went to sleep with the window slightly open, letting the cool night breeze drift in. No fear, no expectation. Life was quietly rearranging itself, even in silence. The next morning, I went to the small store at the end of the Die and Street, bought some fresh fruit, a warm loaf of bread, and a new box of tea. Chatted with the young cashier, both of us laughing as a little boy stretched to reach candy on the high shelf. Small things, but real. Back home, I sat at the table and wrote another page in my journal just for me. Peace doesn't come as a gift. It's the answer to a decision. To stop begging for a place where I was never fully seen. And I've realized, I'm not waiting for forgiveness. I'm granting myself freedom. The air was heavy, clouds thick, the street quiet as if in thought. I drank my coffee early, washed dishes slowly, played soft, instrumental jazz. The remaining lilies in the glass bottle had begun to fade. I left them as they were. There's a kind of proud beauty in flowers that are dying they've endured. And that alone makes them beautiful. Close to noon, I heard 3 knocks at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. hadn't spoken to anyone. My hand still held a dish towel. My heart beat faster, not from fear, but from instinct. I stepped quietly toward the door and looked through the peephole. It was Emily, standing alone, wearing a loose t-shirt, sweatpants, hair hastily tied, holding a canvas tote. In her eyes was a familiar look, the same one she had as a little girl, apologizing after breaking my favorite mug. But this time, I wasn't the mother rushing to open the door before she even finished knocking. I stood still behind it, holding my breath, motionless. She waited, then knocked again. And again. Finally, she sat down on the floor, leaning against the wall, pulling her knees close to her chest. I stayed still behind the door, not out of coldness, but because I knew this moment belonged to her and herself. Emily needed to face the emptiness she had created. About half an hour passed. She sat quietly, fidgeting with her hands, occasionally glancing up at the ceiling, mumbling, something I couldn't hear. Then she wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I didn't open the door. I didn't make a sound. Because for the first time in my life, I understood my presence wasn't always the solution. She needed to feel the weight of absence and to feel it without me catching her right after. When she finally stood up, her knees made a faint cracking sound. She leaned against the wall, looked at the door one last time, then pulled an envelope from her canvas tote, placed it gently on the floor by the door, and walked away. I waited a few minutes, only opening the door once the wooden stairs stopped creaking, picked up the envelope. Inside was another letter, short, but different this time. I didn't read it right away. I set it on the table, then stepped out onto the second-floor balcony, overlooking the quiet street below. Portland was silent that Sunday afternoon, just like me. I opened my lavender-colored journal and wrote, "Today she came, but I didn't open the door. Not out of revenge, but because this time I wasn't guided by her pain anymore, but by my own." I went back inside and opened the letter. The handwriting was shaky, brief, sincere. "Mom, I understand if you don't want to talk to me. I know I came too late, but I had to come to your door, even if you wouldn't open it, because now I finally know what it means to hurt alone. No long excuses, no explanations, no attempts to persuade." Between the lines was silence, and for the first time, I felt it was real. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into my journal among the pages I'd written over the past few days. It was part of my story, but no longer the ending. After that, I made a pot of rice pudding, the kind I used to make when Emily was little. The sweet scent filled the house, soft like a memory, but not nostalgia, a memory that belonged to me, not tied to anyone else. I took a white porcelain bowl, scooped a small portion, and sat by the window to eat. Outside, a few children played beneath the trees, their laughter carried by the wind. It was Sunday, and life went on. After eating, I washed the dishes slowly, then sat down on the light gray sofa, turned on the TV with the volume low, just enough to blend with the sound of my own breathing. The phone on the table buzzed softly, a silent notification. I didn't move, because now I understood. There are doors that, when not opened at the right moment, never need to be opened again. And there are mothers who, once they stop opening every door out of instinct, finally realize the world doesn't fall apart because of it. Before bed, I changed the sheets, chose the floral set I'd saved for a special occasion. Then I smiled, realizing tonight was the special occasion. Because tonight there was no sadness, no duty to heal anyone, no guilt for staying silent. Only me. And after all these years, that was enough. Janet's story is a work of fiction inspired by real experiences, with names and places changed to protect privacy. Behind closed doors, there are countless mothers like her, quietly enduring, loving so deeply they forget themselves. Janet didn't choose bitterness. She chose silence to heal, not to hide. But perhaps, somewhere in each of our hearts, the same question lingers. When we are hurt by the ones we love most, should we speak up or stay silent to keep the peace? The answer may differ for everyone, but one truth remains. God sees every quiet tear and blesses those who love with all their hearts, even through the pain. Thank you for listening. Stay with us and watch the 2 videos on the end screen, stories that also touch the heart, where love, faith, and forgiveness still live on.